Hello there and welcome to AM Prime on WESN Content Capital. I'm Keaton Shaw and thank you very much for joining us this morning. It's Friday, or as I like to say, it's Friday, the final day of the week. And by the way, it's 101 days till Christmas. So for many, the Christmas season actually starts from tomorrow. I know people are already looking forward to Parang that is being held at Lions House here in Port of Spain. But let's just move on from that for a moment as we get into a bit more serious conversations this morning, specifically about our coral reefs here in Trinidad and Tobago. Greater focus actually on Tobago because a project last year was launched to actually help protect Tobago's coral reefs and seagrass beds. The Marine Resilience Initiative, or MARIN Tobago project, was an initiative by the Institute of Marine Affairs in partnership with BPTT, initially for an 18-month pilot project that's now been deemed a success and is due to be executed over the course of the next 5 years at least. So to expand a bit on that, as well as seagrass beds, because we speak about coral reefs a lot, and there's a basic idea about coral reefs and their importance, but seagrass beds, that's not something that is often really heard of. Well, I'm joined this morning by Dr. Anjani Ganesh. She's a research officer in coral reef ecology at the Institute of Marine Affairs, and she's right next to me. Hello, good morning.
Hi, good morning. Thanks for having me.
Well, thank you very much for joining us. Starting this conversation, I was very curious to get a better understanding of coral reef ecology, if you can just explain that for us.
So ecology is the study of relationships. So it's a study of the relationship of biology, physical, and chemistry. And I focus on the ecosystem of coral reefs. And as you may know, coral reefs are like the rainforests of the ocean. So they house a lot of high biodiversity, and they occur in a very narrow window of an environment. So very shallow waters, very warm waters, tropical waters. They like light, they like clean waters. And so it's those environmental conditions that allow corals to thrive in these areas around the tropics, including around Tobago. Mm-hmm.
We understand, well, we have a basic understanding of why coral reefs are important and the role that they play in the ecosystem. But this project in particular has focused a lot on Tobago's coral reefs and seabeds. Is it that Tobago's coral reefs are under great threat? Every year that passes by is just more and more danger that is being, exposed to them, I suppose.
Yeah, coral reefs are one of the most vulnerable ecosystems against climate change. And actually, we're going through a coral bleaching threat in the Caribbean as we speak. And what we're seeing is that with climate change, we're getting more and more of these threats that result in coral mortality. So the Institute of Marine Affairs, we thought we need to do more action in order to build the resilience of reefs around Tobago.
Now, apart from global warming, which we understand is a great threat to coral reef ecosystems, what are some of the other issues associated with, I suppose, coral bleaching and the death of corals?
Yeah. So coral reefs are exposed to a lot of chronic stresses, especially here in the Caribbean. Things like coastal development, which results in increased pollution and runoff from our lands and rivers into our nearby marine habitats. Also things like fisheries. So regulation of fisheries is important because they're important players on the reef, like our parrotfish, our sharks. They have important roles in making sure that the reef is in check. And parrotfish in particular is a great ally to corals because they feed on algae. So there are a lot of chronic stressors that corals already experience, and when you add global warming on top of that, that's an acute stress that would cause severe mortality.
Are there any? Well, when we speak about mortality, oftentimes we think about diseases. Are there diseases that actually affect coral reefs as well?
Yes, especially in the Caribbean, there are a number of diseases that have impacted our coral reefs in the past. We've had a disease outbreak in the 1970s and 80s, which wiped out a lot of our very important branching corals. So imagine branching corals provide a lot of habitat because it creates a lot of nice little spaces for fish to seek refuge. And throughout the Caribbean, I think the disease wiped out up to 95% of that species. What we're seeing is a comeback, but we have constant threat of diseases. The latest one is the stony coral tissue loss disease, which is rapidly wiping out our brain corals, which is very common to our Tobago reefs. So we have a lot of threats on the horizon, and we need to be able to build our capacity to deal with it.
Are there any threats or indications of coral extinction, based off of this research at least?
Not on our research, but the threat of climate change projects that if we exceed global temperatures by 1.5 or even up to 2 degrees, we would probably lose about 99% of our reefs around the world. So there is an urgent need to be able to build our capacity to manage our reefs and protect our reefs so that they can recover quickly, or that we facilitate restoration in a way that we would have some form of an ecosystem that we can rely on in the future.
You would have noticed my eyes and my eyebrows have raised quite a bit there, because the scientists are already predicting we're going to break that barrier, which is quite unfortunate actually. And wow, 99% globally. But there's also been a focus on seagrass beds.
Yes.
What are seagrass beds, and what role do they hold in the entire ecosystem?
So seagrass meadows, they've actually found around Trinidad and Tobago. They used to be found a lot in Williams Bay, down in Chaguaramas, and our largest seagrass bed is found in a marine park in Bucco. And seagrasses are flowering plants, so they have flowers underwater, they have pollinators underwater, and they're a critical habitat similar to coral reefs because they create nurseries for juvenile fish and marine organisms. But I think the seagrasses themselves create structure, so they're an important food source for marine turtles and other animals in the marine environment. What's special about Bucco Reef in particular is the interconnectivity between the coral reefs, the seagrasses, and the mangroves. We don't really have that ecosystem anywhere else in Trinidad and Tobago, and that interconnectivity really creates a high biodiversity area and a really critical nursery for a lot of our marine organisms.
Precisely why this project is crucial. Now, the 18-month pilot project has been deemed a success. From what I understand, it was actually that 18-month time frame was to identify rehabilitation strategies. And now that has been deemed a success. Over the next 5 years, I suppose, comes the implementation phase. What were those strategies identified from this 18-month pilot project?
Yes. So we were essentially trying to figure out whether restoration would be feasible in Tobago given the current ecological state and given the state of management of our marine environment. And for the coral reefs, we wanted to focus on a strategy called larval propagation restoration, which focuses on enhancing the sexual reproduction of corals, right? So, capturing their gametes or their sperm and eggs so that we can have populations of varying genetic diversity. So one of the strategies against climate change is building natural resilience. And so if you have a population with, different genetic combinations, that maybe one colony would do better against heat, another one might do better against disease, that type of restoration would have been preferred for Tobago. So for that exploration, the first thing we needed to know is when did the corals reproduce, because nobody's ever really monitored coral spawning, as we call it, in Tobago. They've done it in many parts of the Caribbean, and what we were trying to do for that year is essentially monitor and map what species, when do they spawn, how much, and what is the best species that we start with in terms of that restoration. And what we did find was that we did find coral spawning. We were able to monitor quite a few species. We were able to map it against the Southern Caribbean calendar, and it did match pretty well. So it was quite a success. And now we know that we can actually collect their gametes and be able to, assist in fertilization and assist in development at early stages.
So I am aware that the IMA actually has been asking the public if they witness coral spawning to please send the information to them, whether it be footage or whatever the case. I am aware of that. The response, though, generally in regards to that, what was the response like?
Unfortunately, that wasn't very high. What we had done is that there were certain months, for example, earlier this year, there was a specific species, the grooved brain coral, that we didn't see spawn. So we were asking the public in May whether, if you were going diving, night diving, to simply observe it. But there are challenges to that. First of all, not many people dive, and even fewer people do night dives, right? And to be able to identify a coral is another challenge. So it is a learning lesson, and I think in the next phase, we're doing a lot more to sort of have people volunteer and be part of the experience so that they can sort of carry it on, and maybe, tour boat operators or dive operators will be able to, do it even as a tourism, tourism component. We did have volunteers last year who joined us and were able to experience the spawning along with us. So that was a success.
So I know we don't have any illustrations or videos with us, but precisely what does coral spawning look like, if you can describe it in words for us?
I think it's been described as like snow underwater, so like reverse snow. So spawning tends to happen on very calm, clear nights, and it's a very slow, peaceful process. I mean, we are swimming around trying to record, but if you were to take in the experience, you see a lot of the little bundles. They look like little pink balls that come out of the corals, and they sort of just slowly drift in the water column, and it is a really special experience. That's
rather incredible. Night diving part, though, I'm not sure if many people would be. So, also the alerts here for heat stress on coral reefs, and there's also been an alert for bleaching on our coral reefs in Tobago. How has that impacted upon the research conducted over the last 18 months?
Well, interestingly, we actually were monitoring for coral spawning up to 2 weeks ago when we had the bleaching alert for the Caribbean, and we did see some bleaching happening on our reefs. We do expect it to get worse, and so we will be calling on the public, people who work in the marine environment, to report whatever bleaching that they see. In other parts of the Caribbean, such as Bahamas, they actually were able to still see spawning of dying corals, of corals that have bleached. And it was very interesting because they're a bleached colony, and you were able to see the pink gametes spawning out of the dying colony. So it was almost like the last sort of, push for survival of that, of that colony by reproducing. It's something that we were trying to figure out whether we would see it in Tobago, but we haven't seen it in that way. But it is something that, as scientists throughout the Caribbean, we are a network, and we are communicating and trying to figure out how the heat stress is affecting the reproductive process. So that's happening.
And that is quite amazing, that how you just said it's like the last push. Yeah. Because I don't think people quite fully understand that corals are living creatures. They're living. So for you to say it's basically the last push for survival of the species, of the ecosystem, it is, I suppose, in a sense, very bittersweet, isn't it? And that may not be the most accurate way to describe it anyway, because the coral is dying, it's dead, but it's still pushing, But beyond that, over the next 5 years, what are the plans? I mean, following the success of this pilot project, what are the plans over the next 5 years?
So one of the main outputs from the pilot was a first version of a guide to restoration of coral reefs and seagrasses. And we are actually going to try and implement certain components based on the research that we did in the pilot. So there'll be 3 main components, and we realize that restoration cannot happen on its own and has to occur within a framework of management. And the specific type of management that we are looking at is resilience-based management. So management that considers a future of unknowns, so climate change being the big unknown in terms of its impacts, as well as a framework that is adaptable. So us being able to make decisions on the fly based on the evidence. And the third thing is it's a holistic way of managing, where it considers the social ecosystem and the marine ecosystem as one. So there's an understanding that we are part of the marine environment, and the management must occur holistically. So basically, in the next phase, we are going to try and develop or build management strategies within a marine resilience network, as we're trying to call it, and that requires a number of stakeholder engagements and trying to understand the vision of marine management for Tobago. And we'll be working with a lot of important stakeholders, Tobago House of Assembly, a lot of NGOs on that. The other component would be the actual implementation of coral propagation strategies, as well as more investigation into seagrass replanting and restoration in different parts of Tobago. And the last component is essentially just building a general awareness, trying to enhance that our connection with the oceans. We are island ecosystems, and we rely very heavily on our ocean backyards.
Do you think there is an understanding of the importance of the ocean, especially Tobago, an island in the Caribbean, well, 2 islands in the Caribbean? Do you think that there is an understanding or a deep appreciation for the waters?
I think there is an understanding of it, and I think it's growing. What needs to happen is the action and connecting the dots of our actions on land to that in the ocean. I think people are aware of things like plastic pollution and coral bleaching, but I think what has to happen in Trinidad and Tobago is that we need to understand that every person has a stake in the health of our marine environment, and so more action needs to happen.
Are there any negatives associated with this particular project, associated with coral rehabilitation and restoration?
I think with respect to coral rehabilitation, planning is key. We do not want to impact our existing, as we say, host corals that we would take our the gametes from. We don't want to add to the damage, and that's why the pilot was actually undertaken, was to make sure that the rehabilitation is not done in vain, right? We don't want to try and restore a place where corals are not likely to survive, and we want to be able to, like I said, plan so that we minimize any kind of risk to the ecosystem.
And my final question, how important is stakeholder engagement and even outreach to communities? What role does that play in regards to the successful outcome of this project?
It's vitally important to restoration. Part of the planning process includes the vision of the stakeholders of what they want in their ocean backyard. So that includes a lot of education and building an understanding of its importance, but aligning it with existing activities, whether it is tourism, whether it is fishing. It all works towards the success of restoration. So it makes no sense that we work separately. It has to go hand in hand, and that's another aim of the next phase.
Certainly. Well, Dr. Anjani Ganesh, thank you so much for joining me this morning. And to you and to the team, are doing an incredible job, actually. Thank you so much. Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure. Dr. Anjani Ganesh joining us on AM Prime this morning, Research Officer in Coral Reef Ecology, explained to us the Marin pilot project and its success, and what is to be undertaken over the course of the next 5 years. Ladies and gentlemen, we all have a role to play, and as Dr. Ganesh mentioned, the seas, the waters surrounding us are very important, and we all have a part in it, and we all can play a vital role in coral reef restoration and rehabilitation, even if it just means having a conversation, educating one another. We take a break here on AM Prime, and when we return, we get into some more conversations. We'll be right back.
Let the Home Store turn your house into a home you love. Get everything you need to give your home that special look and feel. We offer household items, lawn and garden, paint center, hardware, plumbing, lighting and electrical, toys and storage solutions. 5 convenient locations: 6th Avenue Barataria, The Falls at Westmore, Pennywise Plaza Shoguanas, C3 Center Branch and C3 San Fernando. Check out our Facebook page for more information and come visit us today. The Home Store. Turn your house into a home you love.
If these walls could talk, they'd cry uncle. They didn't plan to become offices or yoga studios, but they've stood by us, even when we got a little stir-crazy. For that, they deserve some thanks. They deserve Benjamin Moore.
From Maracas Bay to Arpita Avenue and Piaco, Richard's Bake and Shark brings the world's most popular fish sandwich closer to you. Open daily at all our locations.
FanZone, your reliable, authentic supplier, has just gotten better. You can now visit our website www.fanzonett.com for your authentic wear and collectibles. The only place where you can use both your Visa debit and credit cards. Visit our website fanzonett.com to make your purchase today.
I am Rondell Donowa, attorney at law and host of Strictly Legal on WESN Content Capital. Strictly Legal is a legal program geared towards informing you, the public, of your legal rights, responsibilities, and remedies. So be viewing Thursdays 10 a.m. to 10:30 a.m.
Join me, Dr. Nalini Kokram, on What's Up Doc, where we discuss all your burning questions concerning health.
Trinidad and Tobago is among one of the highest risk group of patients that develop this form of genetic breast cancer.
What I'd like to take home from a short interview like this is screening. You must screen.
Because it's silent.
It's silent.
Yeah.
And because it's silent, you don't know it's there.
What's Up Doc, every Tuesday and Thursday on WESN Content Capital.
Every day, we communicate through stories. Stories of ourselves, our challenges, our goals, our experiences, and our aspirations. Storytelling is an art that we have mastered. WESN Film Studios comprises a collaborative team of experts with extensive industry experience locally, regionally, and internationally. The ability of your business to successfully communicate with your preferred audience depends on the strength of the stories you tell. Your vision should be communicated in a high-quality, professional, and creative way. From concept to post-production, advertising to film, multi-camera productions, live events, streaming, and virtual conferencing, we are WESN Film Studio. Let your own unique voice be heard and your vision realized. Call us today at 628-5835 for your next production.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, and we will be welcoming our second guest hopefully in a moment or two. In the meantime, let's get into some regional updates to have a better understanding of what's taking place across our neighboring islands here in the Caribbean. And we're starting with Jamaica this morning, actually. Jamaica, there have been calls for greater focus to be paid on the influence and operations of gangs within the school setting in Jamaica. Let's take a look at this report.
President of the Jamaica Teachers Association, Leighton Johnson, is pleading to the Ministries of Education and National Security to deploy more school resource officers. He says there's no denying the fact that gangs have established network in schools.
Having these cells in the schools where teachers and students know who these individuals are, it creates fear. It creates fear within the schools, and it creates a threatening environment. School administrators have to use the necessary mechanisms available to them in ridding the schools of these gangs.
The education minister said as part of efforts to increase security in schools, the traditional watchman system will be upgraded to having security guards. Additionally, the education and the national security ministries have been partnering to address the issue of deployment of school resource officers in schools. However, there's a challenge.
I have heard the minister, I've heard the Jamaica Constabulary Force. Yes, they don't have the necessary manpower. But because in these chronic situations, in these cases where our schools are known to have these gangsters there, it is important and urgent for us to have school resource officers stationed at these schools, to assist in maintaining the highest level of discipline and security within these schools.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, taking a look at what else is happening across the Caribbean. Going to St. Lucia this morning, the Labour Minister, Dr. Virginia Albert Poye, cautions that implementing a livable wage could have implications for the state and the private sector. Therefore, a preliminary report is set to be published in the public domain for input before the government sets a livable wage. Now, this is a conversation, as I mentioned, I think it was last week, that is happening all across the Caribbean. A minimum wage versus a minimum livable wage. And now islands such as St. Lucia, even Jamaica, as well as Greendot, Barbados as well, they've been paying great attention to that given the current economic climate and circumstances. A minimum wage is not necessarily a livable minimum wage. I wonder what that means for Trinidad and Tobago. Anyway, let's take a look at this report from St. Lucia.
Policymakers are concerned that the implementation of a livable wage could see corporate merchants hiking the price of goods based on the perceived improvement in the standard of living, thus undercutting efforts to give St. Lucians a hand up. Cabinet is currently deliberating on the preliminary report on the proposed wage with the intention to revise the document to suit the island's circumstances. Labour Minister Dr. Virginia Albert Poye worries that retailers, including grocery store chains, might seek an adjustment in the price of consumer goods in keeping with the new wage scale.
So you will be given the information as soon as it has left cabinet, so you will be able to discuss it in the public domain, because the minimum wage has serious implication, financial implication for government as well as the private sector. It is one where once you up the wage, then it means everything else will go up. Even cost of living will go up. Cost of things in the public domain in terms of the supermarkets and everything else will go up, because people will argue, well, people are getting a little more money now, so why don't we ask more for our items?
And as it pertains to monitoring the increase in the cost of goods to mitigate price gouging with the implementation of a livable wage, Poye has entrusted the Price Control Department with regulating the market.
Government has to monitor that very carefully so that business places do not just put up markup on goods because they hear that people are getting a little more money, that now they try to take it from them through rising cost of living. So that is the responsibility of government to control that. So it is not something that will automatically happen, but it can be one that would tempt some persons to increase cost of things, knowing that, especially when government has an increase for public servants. People in the private sector and in the public domain want to increase prices, I think, because they feel that government employees are getting more money now, so why not up the price for my, what you call the low patat, and your this and your banana. But it is not right, because there was no additional cost to produce these goods. So why should you increase the cost? So price control has to step up on that.
The livable wage is not a flat wage across the board. Calculated on an hourly rate, the wage will depend on the specific sector. Poyet revealed that individuals in the service sector have long complained that the current minimum wage is insufficient.
Those in the hotel sector, those who work in the supermarkets and in the dry goods stores, if you hear what they take home at the end of the month, it is not something that can help them survive. But are the employers paying them the right rate? Once they are paying them the right rate and they work it out, it should give them what we call the minimum wage in that sector. Okay, so we are hoping that the Prime Minister it will have serious financial implications for government too, because there are people who are working for government who may not be at the minimum wage level, and persons who work in the hotels and in the different sectors.
According to Minister Poyet, a minimum wage can be defined as the least amount of money an employer can compensate a worker given the category of work. The wage was calculated using International Labour Organization standards. However, it may not be enough for an individual to survive, and this is where a livable wage comes in. Government will compare the livable wage across the region and the globe and request public feedback before settling on a livable wage.
Well, that report was very dynamic because it also mentioned price controls, and the thing is, it's not all as sweet as it sounds. Now, if we are to have a better understanding of price controls, and I can't necessarily get into all of that this morning, it's perhaps a topic for a later date. The question is whether or not here in TNT we would appreciate government intervention in terms of price control. Now, in some areas, consumers can vent their concerns. There is supposed to be consumer affairs and consumer affairs protection. That's not always been fruitful, has it? Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, let's take a break here on AM Prime. When we return, well, we'll get into another conversation this morning, and that is surrounding animal cruelty in TNT. We'll be right back.
What's the best way to grab the attention of viewers?
Please exercise more patience. You have to be kidding me.
Doing what we do best.
I'll say at the very least it's a conspiracy of laziness against the people.
Join me, Keaton Shaw.
And me, Sean Michael Small, for Talking Point.
Weekdays from 8 a.m. to 9:30 a.m.
We go in-depth on the trending issues and engage the most controversial newsmakers
as we get them to account to the people for their actions.
You can't go to the government with nothing. You can't go to cabinet with an empty hand, with a wish.
I'm glad that we're having this a sober, mature discussion.
In the present situation, I expect a continuation of the chaos.
Join us for the discussion, Mondays to Fridays,
only on WESN,
the content capital.
The issue, the continued rise in the price of flour and its impact on the cost of living in Trinidad and Tobago. How should we go about it? I want to ask you, what has been revealed to you about the state of vulnerability in the country because of this exercise and because of what we're going through? Is the government losing the war on the vaccine front?
The discussion should revolve around the common good for the greatest number of people in Trinidad and Tobago.
How do we inculcate a sense of respect and regard for people who may not be of your own political ilk or persuasion.
The communities are now being used by political opportunists. So
when the tables are turned, it's the same way. Okay, this has been 10 questions. I'm Andy Johnson, and we'll see you next time.
On the next episode of Nicole Larson Live, living in victory every day.
Destined, innovative, virtuous, anointed. Yes.
I love it.
That's how I think. That's how I think God actually sees you, and even your gifts.
I'm still in psychotherapy, you know, over his loss and trying to restructure my life and to live again, because I have that desire, and I think that's what God wants, because this is what he told me. It's time to stop grieving and to move on and to enjoy the life that he's given to me. You know, he's not finished with me yet.
To say now that you're coming full circle and God is like he's saying, listen, I'm affirming you. I'm bringing you back to your homeland just to let you know how loved you are. And he's using us to let you know that he loves you.
I was able to step out with encouragement and, you know, go to like Antique or go to Scouting for Talent. And those are the places that open doors for me.
Give thanks in all circumstances, for this is God's will for you in Christ Jesus.
An encore of Nicole Larson Live, living in victory every day. Every Sunday at 8 p.m. and Wednesday at 4:30 p.m. on WESN.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Now, have you noticed that there are a lot more stray dogs roaming the streets of Trinidad and Tobago? Have you also noticed that there are a lot more deceased animals on the roadways here in TNT? Well, man and dog have formed a relationship for over 15,000 years, but the overbreeding of dogs actually only really started in the 19th century. Now, it's really spawned a lot. Even during the COVID-19 pandemic, families adopted animals for the very first time. And then following the reopening of, well, us getting back to a life of normalcy, it seems as though we've given up on that trend. I'm joined this morning by Miss Sita Kuruvilla. She is, in fact, the chairman of the Trinidad and Tobago Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals, and she's joining us this morning via Zoom. Good morning, Ms. Kuruvilla, and thank you very much for joining us.
Good morning, and thank you for having me.
Well, it certainly is a pleasure to speak once more on a situation. I mean, overbreeding here in TNT, is that something that the TTSBCA has observed in terms of an upward trend?
Okay, so when you're talking about overbreeding, there are, and maybe we could look at it from two facets. One is just the fact that if people have pets or dogs that they don't spay or neuter, and they have, you know, that there's the likelihood that these dogs will breed and produce litters of puppies that they may or may not want, or that they may or may not be able to get homes for. So that's kind of overbreeding by just, you know, passive overbreeding, let's say, you could say, because they're just leaving the animals to their own devices. The other aspect is people who are actually actively breeding their dogs with the intention, in many cases, of making money off the sale of the puppies. And we have seen that a lot post-COVID, people saw the breeding of dogs as a means of making money. And we have witnessed that certainly in the shelter, because we've been seeing breeds like Dalmatians, Malinois, Huskies being bred to a great extent. And what a number of these owners have found is that they couldn't get sales for these dogs. And we have had purebred or sort of purebred dogs dropped off at the shelter or abandoned, tied to the gate. So we saw quite an upturn in the active breeding of dogs for sales and making money, and then the abandonment of these dogs when the owners either couldn't care for them or couldn't get a sale for the puppies.
Are there also instances, any of those, the two instances of which you just classified, is breeding for hobby also under those umbrellas, under any of those umbrellas you just mentioned?
Well, I don't know if I would call it hobby. I mean, there are serious breeders who are very careful about the lineage of the parents, and they may produce good quality dogs for training or of some kind, maybe whether it's for protection or otherwise. So there are serious breeders who will take very good care of the dogs, very good care of the puppies, and are pretty aware of what the environment is in terms of of sale and so on of those puppies. But yes, so there are serious people like that, but there are a lot of people who are just trying to make money, and so they're overbreeding their dogs. And sometimes these dogs don't even have a good lineage, but they're overbreeding them and producing very sort of poor quality puppies because they're not even being well cared for in the early stages. And then they will abandon them or give them up or just pass them on to somebody else. So I think there's been a lot of that happening post-COVID as a means of making money, and we've seen it a lot more than we had seen it in the past.
Mm-hmm. Now, also, in that sense, what are the dangers to animals in terms of overbreeding? And I'm using this term overbreeding, and again, I know you've corrected me, but what are the dangers associated health-wise?
Well, if part of the problem is that, as I mentioned, often, well, for one thing, people are mixing breeds. So you will have, Huskies are really popular, and people are crossing Huskies with Shepherds, and so they're coming up with dogs like Shepskis and so on. Now, I'm not, I'm not an expert or anything on things like dog training and breeding. But we do have some really well-qualified trainers who advise us and help us at the shelter when we need help. And what they've been saying is that you take a dog with certain traits, that, like a Husky, for example, these are dogs that are not at all aggressive or anything like that. But then you mix breed them with another breed, and really you don't know what you're getting at the end of the day in terms of temperament. So, I mean, that's really something for trainers to speak about. By and large, with us and overbreeding, what we see is massive neglect of animals and abandonment. And this is usually when, the puppies that are produced are not considered particularly desirable. So they are just abandoned, or the dogs themselves are abandoned. And we saw it a lot even in the earlier days with pit bulls. They would breed a female over and over and over again, and then at some point they will abandon the dog. We picked up many overbred pit bull females from the road, from the streets.
Now, apart from that, is there a need then for breeding on a whole to be regulated?
Certainly, breeding should definitely be regulated. In fact, when the when there was all the discussion about the Dog Control Act prior to its proclamation in 2013 and 2014, we had proposed to the government that they really should look at registering dogs, all dogs in general, requiring that, dogs were licensed like it used to be a long time ago. And that really there should be a big push to spay and neuter dogs and really only license, breeders. So only people who have a proper license and their places inspected should be allowed to breed dogs.
Mm-hmm.
But really what we need is a serious push to spaying and neutering of dogs in this country.
And in that sense, the TTSBC offers services such as that?
Yes, we offer spay-neuter services at a much lower than normal rate, offered by the vet clinics. The vet clinics may offer a greater range of services, but we are really looking at people who maybe can't afford the regular services. And there are a number of other groups, Animal Welfare Network, Animals 360, they also offer a low-cost option. They work in collaboration with vet clinics, and they offer a subsidized option through these clinics. So it is available if people are interested. Help is available to get animals spayed and neutered.
And furthermore, I'm glad that you emphasized on that, because in some instances there are those out there who have animals, they love animals, but they don't necessarily have the time to look after animals. I know of instances of people who have animals for just part of saying, it's keeping my home secure, but don't necessarily look after the dog. And there are instances where they just, the dog escapes, the dog, goes and breeds with another, and people can't look after these animals. So it goes back again to education as well, and a certain level of responsibility and maturity.
Well, certainly education is very important, and public awareness is important, but then you need to back up that information and awareness with the provision of services. So, it's all well and good to tell people, don't abandon your animals, try and find a home or give them into a facility or a shelter, or tell people spay and neuter your animals, and then they can't afford the costs of their service. So really, awareness is very important, of course, but then you need to make sure that you have the services available to the public. Currently, in terms of facilities, if people want to give up their animals and not sort of abandon them on the road, in terms of facilities, there are very few. We have the shelter in Port of Spain, which is, as we say, an open admission shelter. And there's one in Bacalet in Tobago. And then there are a number of other, there's shelters around the country, mostly, I would say, small scale, run by individuals, apart from the Animals Alive shelter in South, which is a small sanctuary setup. In terms of government facilities, the only facility available at this point is the San Fernando Pound, and as you know, that facility has a really checkered past, and there's still a big battle going on about the way in which that facility is managed and the treatment of the animals in the facility. Mm-hmm. So if you don't have sufficient or adequate facilities in the country to take unwanted animals, then you're going to have a big stray problem with people abandoning them on the road. In terms of spay and neuter, well, yes, there are lower cost options available. But what we find, and I know Animal Welfare Network has been doing this work since about 2005, what we find is people call in and ask for the service, and we make all the arrangements with the vet clinic. And really only about 50% of the people then take up that option. They just don't bother to turn up. you know. So it's, you know, short of going to their people's homes and taking their animals and getting it done, it can be quite a challenge to get people to spay and neuter their animals.
Well, Ms. Corville, I want to thank you for your time this morning. I'm so sorry we don't have more to expand the conversation, but nevertheless, it's been a pleasure, and always thank you for the time and for the work that you and the rest of the team are doing.
Okay, thank you very much.
All the very best. Ms. Sita Kuruvela joining us this morning, Chairman of the TTSPCA. Ladies and gentlemen, we break for news on the hour, and when we return, well, we'll welcome our third and final guest for this morning's edition of AM Prime.
Here is the WESN News on the Hour. I'm Sira Ali. Thanks for joining us. Here are the headlines. TASA not made in TNT, despite calls from the opposition leader to give it national instrument status. Bandit knocked down by car, beaten by patrons after failed Aruka bar robbery. Close call as a man escapes gunfire during late-night iPhone purchase. Now for the details. Despite opposition leader Kamla Prasad-Bisasa's call for the TASA to be granted the status of a national instrument, one TASA group leader asserts that this percussion instrument is not of local origin and rightfully belongs to India. During the ceremonial opening of the 4th session of the 12th Parliament, President Christine Kangaloo advocated for the official recognition of the steel pan as Trinidad and Tobago's national instrument. In response, Prasad-Bisasa expressed agreement with the idea while suggesting that TASA should also be considered for this honor. However, on Wednesday, Lenny Kumar, a Hummingbird Gold recipient and the founder of NGC Trinidad and Tobago Sweet TASA Group, lent his support to designating the steel pan as the official national instrument. Kumar, however, remained undecided about whether TASA should share the same recognition. A suspected robber met a fatal end in Aruka during the early hours of Thursday morning. According to sources, the incident unfolded at New Luna Bar in Aruka at around 1:45 a.m. when two individuals, one of whom was brandishing a sizable stone, entered the establishment and began intimidating both patrons and staff. The bandit wielding the stone targeted a woman, attempted to rob her. However, the courageous woman, with the support of her common-law husband, put up a spirited resistance against the assailant. In an attempt to escape, both robbers fled onto the eastern main route, but their plans took a tragic turn when one of them was struck by a passing Nissan Almera. The vehicle executed a U-turn and collided with the bandit for a second time. Meanwhile, the patrons from the bar, incensed by the failed robbery, took matters into their own hands, assaulting the unconscious bandit and his accomplice. Eventually, law enforcement was summoned, and they promptly transported the injured man to the hospital. The bandit, who had been struck and beaten, identified as Clinton Changa, succumbed to his injuries and was pronounced dead by Dr. Singh at hospital. The second robber, a 35-year-old Aruka resident, received medical attention for minor cuts and bruises. The North Central Division Police are actively conducting further investigations into this dramatic incident. A 27-year-old Marabella resident narrowly escaped a life-threatening situation while on a quest to purchase an iPhone 12 smartphone in the early hours of Thursday morning. According to news source, the man embarked on this endeavor by heading to Pinto Road, Arima, in search of a good deal. arriving at Motley Trees, Pinto Road, around midnight. The man's initial excitement quickly turned into suspicion when he found the street devoid of any sign of the seller. As he attempted to reverse his vehicle and depart from the area, a troubling sight greeted him. 3 individuals were approaching his car, one of them armed with a firearm. In a desperate bid to escape imminent danger, the man accelerated away from the scene, narrowly avoiding injury as the armed assailant discharged multiple gunshots, striking the car's windshield and rear window. Subsequently, a formal report was filed, prompting police officers from the Arima CID to initiate an ongoing investigation into the incident. Well, that's news to the hour on WESN. I'm Sarah Ali. Thanks for watching.
We exposed 5 strangers to KFC's delicious chicken to see if any time could be KFC time. And at the first bite, the party began. We repeated the experiment during the day, during business hours, on weekends, with sunshine, with rain, and it's confirmed. KFC's flavor makes anytime KFC time. KFC, it's finger licking good.
Let the home store turn your house into a home you love. Get everything you need to give your home that special look and feel. We offer household items, lawn and garden, paint center, hardware, plumbing, lighting and electrical, toys and storage solutions. 5 convenient locations: 6th Avenue Barataria, The Falls at Westmall, Pennywise Plaza Shoguanas, C3 Center Branch and C3 San Fernando. Check out our Facebook page for more information and come visit us today. The Home Store. Turn your house into a home you love.
If these walls could talk, they'd cry uncle. They didn't plan to become offices or yoga studios, but they've stood by us, even when we got a little stir-crazy. For that, they deserve some thanks. They deserve Benjamin Moore.
From Maracas Bay to Arafita Avenue and Piaco, Richard's Bake and Shark brings the world's most popular fish sandwich closer to you. Open daily at all our locations.
On March 4th of 2014, at around 12:05 a.m., Senior Counsel Dana Sita-Hal's life was taken from her. It's been over 9 years, and still the criminal justice system here in TNT has failed many. With stories that we've heard from many factors that they simply cannot let go of any grief because justice has never been served. And there are those who have said justice will never be served. But this morning, one family is speaking to us openly about the impact of Dana Sita-Hal's murder and their thoughts about the criminal justice system. In fact, I'm joined this morning by Ms. Danielle Francois. She is the niece of former Senior Counsel Dana Sita-Hal, and she's with us via Zoom. Good morning, Ms. Francois, and thank you very much for joining us.
Good morning to you and your viewers.
Ms. Francois, I know that this is a very difficult interview. I know that it's been 9 years and still not much has been said, not much has been done. How does your family, I suppose, continue to grapple or to even try to let go of the grief of this crime?
Hi, well, it's not like really letting go. It's we try to keep her memory alive with us and with other people that cared about her and loved her. And every year we try to remember her. However, the stress of the situation has definitely taken its impact on my family. And while we may have been suffering from some issues before, it got like very much exacerbated. We lost 3 of my other aunts, 3 of her sisters since it happened, and those were issues that did not have to be so severe, and they weren't severe before. The emotional toll takes a lot.
And in that sense as well, the emotional toll is just further compounded by any lack of progress in a case. I mean, 14 months after her murder, there were individuals who were arrested and charged with her murder. But up until this day, not even any progress following the preliminary inquiry.
Well, the preliminary inquiry concluded in 2020, and we are still waiting for it to be heard in the High Court. I mean, I heard that it might be an issue with transcribing notes from the preliminary inquiry, which seems odd given that those things could be automated right now with technology and, done immediately. So I was told that is one of the delays.
In terms of the actual investigation and those prosecuting the case, what is the communication like? Or has that communication remained constant?
I made it constant. They did not have a choice there. So I would go and meet with the investigators, and I would go and meet and communicate with the prosecutors as well, just to find out what is going on, what's the progress, etc.
Did you have to make it constant? Do you feel as though it became no other choice but for you to do such? That level of communication, that is.
It was important to me, that's why I did it. But as you know, it is slow. So yeah, I'm sure most people, I know of other families where their loved ones were murdered and they were also, trying to speed up the justice system. It is very slow. The preliminary inquiry took many years. And that's not even the trial as yet.
Now, some people might say the obvious response is that there is still a lot of difficulty, but even speaking to you this morning, every year on the anniversary of the murder of Dana Sita-Hal and your family, having to, yes, keep her memory alive and hold on to those fond memories through, but the difficulties associated with this even after 9 years. Every time you speak about Dana Sita-Hal, has that become something that is easier over time, even though there's been any lack of progress? Is it just extremely difficult every time this topic is raised?
It is very difficult. It was actually easier in the beginning with the shock, but as the time progresses and the frustration progresses, and we have had other family losses, it's very hard, and many people, I'm one of the few ones still willing to talk and go into the depth of our pain.
Why though? Why are you willing to be so open about this pain? Because again, speaking to you live on television, I could only imagine actually the difficulty, but why are you willing to speak so openly about this pain and frustration?
She meant everything to me, and I want to make sure that I keep her memory alive with the people and the public that she loved. She loved Trinidad and Tobago, and she lent herself as well to the public, and I don't want to shut that out in my own pain.
She loved Trinidad and Tobago, and there was a great respect from all parts of Trinidad and Tobago for Dana Sita-Hal. In fact, everybody knew who Dana Sita-Hal was. But do you think that love that she shared for Trinidad and Tobago, that love is actually being reciprocated now in a time when I suppose that love and that work that she put towards making TNT better in all factors, do you feel that sense of love now?
I know that there are particular difficulties that each office faces and constraints, so that's all I can say.
How has the past 9 years impacted upon particularly you and your view of Trinidad and Tobago and what Trinidad and Tobago is?
I love Trinidad and Tobago, and I still want to keep progressing to push it further and better. It is very hard. Sometimes you need to take a break emotionally, but I do see where we can be better, and we just need to keep putting that pressure on for everybody to be better, because when you stop putting that pressure is when everything starts to slip.
Mm-hmm. Well, you did write a column, in fact, and I recall reading that column, and there was a lot of emotion that was put into that writing, but there also seems to have been a lot of frustration and anger mixed with a sense of sympathy as well as lost love. The way you ended that column was farewell TNT, I hope we meet in better circumstances. If I'm not mistaken, that may not be the actual words, but something along those lines. Do you still feel that way?
Partly. What had happened at that time is that I was getting so many people calling me about corruption and these different experiences that they had, and they were in fear about what to do about it. And I was like, I don't know what to do about it either, because there is a lot of fear about how to deal with it properly among all aspects of Trinidad and Tobago society and professional capacities. But I left, and 6 months later I came right back.
Hard to leave her. It's very difficult to actually let go. But now specifically in regard to the criminal justice system, and again, the preliminary inquiry ended in 2020. Not much has changed or happened since, if any at all. But your views of the criminal justice system here in Trinidad and Tobago?
Well, I'm actually studying to become a criminal psychologist. So I'm in the process of doing it. So I do believe that there are areas in which it could be strengthened and changed.
Mm-hmm. And how much influence did your aunt have on you actually, studying this particular field?
My joke has always been that she brainwashed me from the beginning. She ideally wanted me to be a lawyer, but when she would talk about the different aspects of the criminal mind, that really, really interested me, especially where she was able to look at a case and pretty much know who did it and how quickly the police would identify the perpetrator. And I was like, wow, you're so amazing. I wanted to do that. So I do a lot of research now on the murder toll in Trinidad and Tobago.
Actually, yes, that research also is available online if people are most interested in reading it. I had the opportunity to peruse through it yesterday, but in that sense as well, do you believe that you and your family will ever receive any form of justice?
Well, I mean, the idea of justice is that what was done, like kind of retribution, like what was done to you could be made up in some kind of way. And I don't see how the loss of a person that meant so much to us in so many different aspects of our life could ever be made up. There's no compensation. There's nothing that could be done really to make that better. Mm-hmm. But she believed in the criminal justice system, and so she deserves that final closure.
Do you think that there's just been a sense that even those with the authority and power have just given up on this case?
No, I don't.
And you and your family have not given up on this case either?
We have not.
But this sense of anger and frustration, do you suppose that it may ever get better?
I can hope so. With the changing of how we do preliminary inquiries, it should speed up justice, as well as if the DPP's office gets more staff and maybe embracing more of the technological advances that there are in the country. I think things could speed up and get better if people are willing to change.
Mm-hmm. Well, if people are willing to change, certainly a question of psychology there. And you know, just from your standpoint, from your experiences, from all that you've witnessed and gone through, you and your family, is there any sense that that is something that can take place here in TNT? We've spoken so much about change. Oftentimes, it's just become part of heavy debates and conversation, but nothing ever seems to progress. And I don't know if I'm just being pessimistic, and there is actually a lot more positive out there. But from your point of view, do you see that positive change happening, falling
I
into
see
place?
tiny baby steps, and that's the best way for change to occur, because if there was suddenly massive change, that would be very unsettling.
Now, Ms. Francois, we don't have much time for the interview again this morning. And again, thank you so much for joining me. But there's so many questions that I can ask you and go into finer details and further details. But this 9 years, you know, how long do you suppose it's... You said that no matter what, the pain associated with this loss can never really be taken away. Is it that this is something that you've now accepted, that you have no other choice but to live with?
Yeah, I think that's the only way to do it.
And is that...
Otherwise, the grief will be too much.
Is that also coming from your studies in psychology as well? Is that also part of your coping mechanism? Because it wouldn't necessarily be the same for all of your family.
It's not the same for all of my family. It's my coping mechanism, and it's probably not one advocated by psychology.
Well, Ms. Francois, I want to thank you very much this morning for joining me. In fact, I'd like to end with a quotation from your mom, Suzanne Francois, and she says, "I just really hope something is done soon about the crime situation in this country. How long must people suffer? How much longer must people be confined to their homes? How much longer will people not be able to have a quality of life in this country, a quality of life that people in other parts of the world enjoy?" And I would simply end by asking you, Ms. Francois, do you think that as much as you love Trinidad and Tobago, do you see a life for yourself in TNT?
I see a life trying to create change.
And we can all support that. Ms. Danielle Francois, thank you very much for joining me this morning. Appreciate your time. And again, I know there's a lot of difficulty associated with these conversations, but your willingness to speak openly with us certainly is appreciated. Thank you very much, and all the best to you and to your family.
Thank you.
Have a good day. Ms. Danielle Francois, the niece of former senior counsel Dana Sita-Hal, joining me on AM Prime this morning. Yes, I am very much aware that there's so much more that we can get into, and there's a lot of technicalities, but sometimes you need to have that one-on-one conversation, and sometimes you need to have a deeper conversation just beyond all that is part of this criminal investigation, this case. Ladies and gentlemen, let's take a break here on AM Prime, and when we return, well, we'll just wrap things up for this morning's edition of the program.
Bill and Ruth fell in love with the Benjamin Moore color Dry Sage, but they tried to match it using another brand's paint.
I mean, it's close enough.
Almost identical, really. Yeah, there it is.
Never trust another paint to be a Benjamin Moore color.
You gave us the inspiration to be first. We gave you the solutions that put you first. You walked with us side by side, and we continued to serve you with pride. First Citizens celebrates with you 30 years of achieving dreams, shaping success stories, and painting brighter futures together. And together, we'll accomplish so much more. First Citizens, together, 30 and beyond.
From Maracas Bay to Arafita Avenue and Piaco, Richard's Bake and Shark brings the world's most popular fish sandwich closer to you. Open daily at all our locations.
on the next episode of Nicole Larson Live. Living in victory every day.
Destined, innovative, virtuous, anointed. Yes.
I love it.
That's how I think. That's how I think God actually sees you, and even your gifts.
I'm still in psychotherapy, over his loss and trying to restructure my life and to live again because I have that desire, and I think that's what God wants, because this is what he told me. It's time to stop grieving and to move on and to enjoy the life that he's given to me. He's not finished with me yet.
To say now that you're coming full circle and God is like he's saying, listen, I'm affirming you. I'm bringing you back to your homeland just to let you know how loved you are. And he's using us to let you know that he loves you.
I was able to step out with encouragement and, go to like Antique or go to Scouting for Talent. And those are the places that open doors for me.
Give thanks in all circumstances, for this is God's will for you in Christ Jesus.
An encore of Nicole Larson Live, living in victory every day. Every Sunday at 8 p.m. and Wednesday at 4:30 p.m. on WESN.
My name is Carl Media, and I'm the founder and the host of Ever Increasing Voice Ministries. Join me every Saturday and Sunday on WESN, this powerful station, at 9 a.m. on Saturdays, 1 p.m. and 7 p.m. nightly. Also on Sundays, I'll be on at 7 a.m., 1 p.m. and 7 p.m. at night time. When you come here, we are getting people heavenly ready.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for joining me on AM Prime this morning, and that's it for this week. I'd like to thank my guest, Dr. Anthony Ganes, as we started the program about the Marine Project and the rehabilitation and restoration of Tobago's coral reefs. This is through the Institute of Marine Affairs and funded by BPTT. The 18-month pilot project has been deemed a success, and it's now the implementation phase over the next 5 years. We were then joined by Ms. Sita Corvella. She is the chairman of the TTSPCA, as we had a conversation about the breeding of animals in TNT and how that can reflect as animal cruelty or even neglect. We ended this edition of AM Prime with the conversation of Dana Sitahal's niece, former senior counsel Dana Sitahal's niece, Ms. Daniela Francois. She had a conversation with us this morning, and we thank her once more because it's never easy, it's never difficult, but as she said, she's an advocate for change, and she hopes that we make progress and some level of positive movement. I'm Keaton Shaw. This has been AM Prime on WESN Content Capital. Stay tuned for more programming throughout the day. We have Talking Point from 8 o'clock, and then 10 Questions with Andy Johnson from 10 o'clock. But have a great weekend. May it be a safe one, and may we all do our part to make Trinidad and Tobago just a bit sweeter. I'll see you again on Monday morning from 6 o'clock. Bye-bye.
WESN.
I'm Sean Michael Small, and we are WESN, the Content Capital.
If these walls could talk, they'd cry, "Uncle." They didn't plan to become offices or yoga studios, but they've stood by us, even when we got a little stir-crazy. For that, they deserve some thanks. They deserve Benjamin Moore.
The issue, the continued rise in the price of flour and its impact on the cost of living in Trinidad and Tobago. How should we go about it? I want to ask you what has been revealed to you about the state of vulnerability in the country because of this exercise and because of what we're going through. Is the government losing the war on the vaccine front?
The discussion should revolve around the common good for the greatest number of people in Trinidad and Tobago.
How do we inculcate a sense of respect and regard for people who may not be of your own political ilk or persuasion?
The communities are now being used by political opportunists. So
when the tables are turned, it's the same way. Okay, this has been 10 questions. I'm Andy Johnson, and we'll see you next time.
I am Rondell Donowa, attorney at law and host of Strictly Legal on WESN Content Capital. Strictly Legal is a legal program geared towards informing you, the public, of your legal rights, responsibilities, and remedies. So be viewing Thursdays 10 a.m. to 10:30 a.m.
Join me, Dr. Nalini Kokram, on What's Up Doc, where we discuss all your burning questions concerning health.
Trinidad and Tobago is among one of the highest risk group of patients that develop this form of genetic breast cancer.
What I'd like to take home from a short interview like this, screening. You must screen.
Because it's silent.
It's silent.
Yeah.
And because it's silent, you don't know it's there.
What's Up Doc, every Tuesday and Thursday on WESN Content Capital.
Is it politics? What is it? Is it that nobody cares about sports?
The kind of support that sport used to get in the past is no longer here.
The thing is, taking a knee doesn't mean that that's the only thing you're doing now, Andy.
Right.
Taking a knee along with other stuff.
Samantha, what are you looking forward to when you return home to Trinidad and Tobago after winning the title?
Thank you very much for speaking it into existence.
Is there no pressure on Nicholas Ball?
It makes me more motivated to work hard and to go out there and rep the red, white and black.
Why are we sending a team to the Winter Olympics?
There are a number of Trinidadians who are in the diaspora and have grown up in winter sport. It's an opportunity that the Trinidad and Tobago Olympic Committee will not close the door on.
I also believe in the players that we have. Once you can motivate the players, you can get the best out of them.
We are WESN, the premier platform for Caribbean content. WESN, covering West, East, South, and North. WESN, we entertainment, sports, and news. WESN, available on Greendot 7, Amplia 118, Airlink 17, Bmobile 107, Digicel 21, ICNTT 105, and Flow 110. Connect with us at WESNCC or stream online at www.wesncc.com. WESN,